Chances for tropical development are quickly increasing, and the Gulf Coast should start to prepare. What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. All right, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have a lot to talk to you about today in regards to potential Gulf development as well as Caribbean development. And we're also watching our two areas of interest that one of them will soon become a tropical depression in the East Pacific if it hasn't already. At the time of recording this video, this has just been designated a tropical depression 2E, at least Invest 91E was. But ultimately, it's not being shown by the NHC website. We'll get to that in just a second. But at this current point in time, we're paying attention to those two areas as well. We're also watching the ensembles and the operational models for the Gulf, and we're going to continue to pay attention to those. So with that being said, we have a lot to dive into. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into it right here. Let's go ahead and get started right here. At this current point in time, Invest 91E has just been upgraded according to the National Hurricane Center as a tropical depression at the time of recording this video. It's just not showing on the graphic. It is. I've been looking at it behind the scenes. I know other websites. Official websites have posted this as a tropical depression. I'm going to go ahead and refresh this. It just needs to refresh on the NHC website real quickly. So at least at this current point, this is a tropical depression, and probably in the next 20 minutes or so, by the time I'm recording this, this will pop up in there. By the time you see this video, this will definitely be a tropical depression at this point, so I just want to make that clear. But we also have this other area of interest that I do want to watch out for, Invest 92E, and we're going to go ahead and read through it, and we're going to go ahead and talk about this a little bit. Shower and thunderstorm activity associated with a broad area of low pressure offshore of Central America has changed little in organization this morning. Some development is expected, however, and a tropical depression is likely to form during the next day or two while the system moves slowly northward towards the coast of Central America. Interests along the Pacific coast of northwestern Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, and El Salvador should monitor the progress of the system. Regardless of development, heavy rainfall and life-threatening flash flooding are possible across portions of Costa Rica, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Guatemala through early this week. 70% chance in the next 48 hours, 70% in the next 7 days. So that's the situation that we have going on according to the National Hurricane Center. Let's go ahead now and talk ensembles, and we'll go ahead and start here with the European. So here is our European model for you guys right here. This goes about 6 days out. Let's actually go ahead and go back to about 48 hours out just to cover this tropical depression and the start of this development. And the reason we're going so early now is because we're also watching how this system will ultimately bring some carryover effect to what may be happening in the Caribbean and in the Gulf in the near future. So we're going to go ahead and talk about this and look at the threat for right away at this current point. And taking a quick gander at this, 48 hours out, the system's organizing and developing and growing, already starting to potentially bring a lot of impacts for a lot of people off the western coast of Mexico. Over here, not as much power as what we were looking at maybe a couple of days ago. Even looking at potentially strong tropical storm strength compared to hurricane strength that we saw previously. It's definitely been a rapidly evolving situation. First, we were looking at TS, and then we were looking at hurricane strength, then potentially major hurricane strength, and then back down all over again as the system started to slowly get its act together. But ultimately, its close proximity to the coast does concern me quite a bit. It's definitely something we're watching out for, even going 72 hours out now. So this will be for Wednesday. And by Wednesday, this system mostly it appears that dissipates either due to land interaction or close proximity to land. And you're also looking at this area of interest over here, Invest 92E, starting to get its act together off the coast of Nicaragua. And there is actually a little bit of power associated with this ensemble run right here, 988, 984, and several of these actually, potentially up to a strong tropical storm or low hurricane strength off the coast of Nicaragua, Honduras, and El Salvador. Definitely something that you're going to want to pay attention to. And it's this system right here that I'm also watching for potential Atlantic development. And the reason I'm paying attention to that is because of the possible carryover effect that's going to have if it moves through the Central American Isthmus or moves into the Gulf of Tehuantepec and enters the Bay of Campeche. And let's go ahead and go to 4 days out. So this will be for Thursday. As we get to Thursday, we're seeing a kind of a split in the models. Some of them want it moving further to the west, through off the coast of El Salvador, Guatemala, and towards the Gulf of Tehuantepec, while the rest of them are kind of staying off the coast of Nicaragua and starting to move slowly up to the north towards El Salvador and Honduras. So that's what we're looking at for right now, and it's definitely something that we need to watch, and it kind of will be very dependent on where the system will end up in the Atlantic and where the development will possibly start. If it stays further to the east, it's going to move north into the Caribbean. If it moves further to the west and into the Gulf of Tehuantepec, it's going to start in the Bay of Campeche. So those are two distinct areas that you're going to want to pay attention to right here. And as we get to 120 hours out, so this will be for Friday, you're definitely starting to notice that right here. You're noticing a lot of these areas of interest moving through Honduras and El Salvador on the eastern side of it into the Caribbean Sea. And you're also seeing a couple variations kind of moving through Central America towards the Bay of Campeche as well. These systems right here, not these systems, but these models right here, this part of the spaghetti plot is heading towards the Gulf of Tehuantepec. And that would be more conducive for this shifting over and either heading towards the Bay of Campeche or moving just off the coast of Mexico and bringing potential impacts to areas like Veracruz. Mexico City could potentially be in the line of fire from some of the outer bands as well, Pueblo, those areas too. But there's what we got there. Let's go ahead and go to 144 hours out. Yeah, we're definitely noticing more of that. You're definitely noticing more organization on the eastern side. And if this system just stays out to the east and stalls out over there, then you're going to have a situation where this system also continues to intensify and continues to strengthen, and it'll be more organized. Whereas if it stays further to the west, it might get stronger in the short term, but in the long run, it'll remain relatively weak as it starts to move slowly to the northwest or north-northwest towards the northeastern Mexican coast, rather, and towards Texas. So that's kind of your kind of catch-22 that we have going on here, and this split in the models definitely gives us two distinct possibilities going forward. And as we go ahead and go to 8 days out, so this will be next Monday at this current point, as we get to that, definitely seeing this system starting to get its act together a bit more in the Gulf region. Definitely a little bit of power associated with it too, 991, 992, 999 as well, but this does appear to be relatively large and broad and not necessarily strong and tight or necessarily, so that's part of the reason why you're not seeing that as strong wind field. It looks to me that it's going to be a rather broad system that moves through the Caribbean and in the Gulf, but it's not going to be a relatively, like the pressure gradient force on that and the pressure gradient in general is going to be relatively spread out, and that's why you're not seeing these stronger wind speeds associated with it right here. I think the max we see is 60 miles per hour with this trend, and then as we go to 9 days out, so for next Tuesday, definitely seeing a little more power over here as this kind of starts to spread out towards the Gulf as well, and it's definitely something that we're going to want to pay attention to going forward. And then as we go to 10 days out right here, definitely watching that a bit more, and we kind of still have a bit more, we still have time to figure out what this is going to ultimately do as well. It's a bit more scattered. It's not terribly concentrated right now. It is kind of concentrated. It's a lot better than what the GFS ensembles were showing last video, but still needs time to figure out what it's going to do, and it's something that we're going to watch out for and we're going to pay attention to here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. Shifting over to the operational runs, here's what we have for the European with the 0Z. This is probably going to be a situation where the operational run is going to have to catch up with the ensembles, and I was kind of looking at this a little bit earlier today. So here's what we have for the European. You have this very broad system off the coast of Mexico starting to get its act together, get to tropical storm strength before making landfall. And then you have your other system over here off the coast of Nicaragua moving north towards Honduras and El Salvador, potentially strengthening up to a strong tropical storm or weak hurricane as it makes landfall in El Salvador. according to the operational European, kind of splitting the track a little bit between moving further to the east near the El Salvador Honduras border, or further to the west near the Gulf of Tehuantepec. So that's definitely an interesting development going on right here. So that's what we're looking at. You have this low pressure system moving through Central America and heading towards the Yucatan Peninsula and towards the Bay of Campeche as it emerges kind of somewhere in the middle between the Caribbean and the Western Bay, as a lot of the models were forecasting. So it's kind of the operational kind of splitting the difference, it seems, and it kind of is going to show that that the operational run is kind of just taking the average of what's going on and then moving through with it. But as the operational continues, you start seeing the system organize, and I do find it kind of curious. The operational actually has this as a relatively small and a rather tight system initially, although it does start to broaden out as it moves into the Gulf region a bit more and heads towards the Yucatan Peninsula and Texas as well, bringing some potential impacts as well. So that's what we have according to the European. Just for my curiosity, what was the 12Z European bringing previously? Because I want to see how this has evolved. Yeah, it's definitely uptrended compared to what the European yesterday was bringing as well. It was a lot more broad. This system, according to the 0Z, is a lot tighter, and it's shifting a bit further to the east as well. So that's a trend that we might want to see if that continues to evolve, and just watch it and monitor it and see how things will start panning out with that. And just for my own curiosity, I do want to check the wind shear and the dry air aspect of this as well, just to kind of get a whole dynamical view of what exactly this is going to be moving through. So here's what we have with the wind shear aspect of this. Let's go ahead and move this back a little bit. You have the system making landfall in Central America right here, and then as you start to see this head towards the Yucatan, definitely noticing a gap in the wind shear. Definitely noticing a wind shear pocket that the European is kind of highlighting over here as well. Definitely something that you're going to want to watch out for, and definitely going to want to pay attention to, because if this wind shear gap and this wind shear pocket kind of persists and it remains there by the time this low pressure system moves towards the Gulf region, you're going to have a situation where this could potentially get its act together and organize a little bit. That is a bit of a concern that I'm having with this. That said, there is some strong shear that moves just to the northeast of it, and it's kind of hugging its northeastern quadrant right there, and that's what likely will inhibit it from organizing potentially even further than what we were originally looking at from previous runs. So ultimately, you have wind shear kind of starting to chip at it and tear it apart as it heads towards the coast over here. But overall, a short-lived tropical storm is not out of the realm of reality with this whole system right here, and it's something that you're going to want to pay attention to, as I keep saying ad nauseum. Looking at the dry air aspect of it, well, there's not too much dry air that I'm looking at right here. It's mainly the wind shear that's going to be the big issue with this right here. Kind of a bit of a flip from previous runs. Wind shear wasn't going to be the big issue. It was the dry air. And I will tell you this. If it was dry air and that was the problem in the wind shear that wasn't, then you would have had a situation where the system would have had to develop a lot of convection to basically pump out and mix out the dry air. Here you have more moisture to work with compared to what we've seen previously, and if the wind shear is the deal breaker right here, with that dry air, like smidge of dry air potentially over here starting to entrain the system, yes, it's going to cause quite a few problems, and that's why I think the European starts to slowly kill it, because of both the wind shear and that little bit of dry air right there. But it is, at least in theory, mixable, and it's not necessarily the worst I have seen in terms of this. So if dry air entrainment ends up killing this, the part of the reason will be because is the close proximity to the wind shear. Excuse me for stammering for a second, but ultimately, overall, the European dynamics and the synoptics of this are actually pretty decent. I would say the steering currents are definitely a lot more believable than what I was seeing previously as well. You're definitely seeing that low pressure system off the near Colorado, New Mexico, and Oklahoma kind of pulling this system towards it. That's kind of how tropics work. They get pulled towards low pressure systems. They get pulled away from high pressure systems. That's why you have your steering currents, ladies and gentlemen. That's why the Bermuda High plays such an important role in steering hurricanes and tropical cyclones further to the west or further to the east, depending on how it weakens and collapses. Troughs and ridges play a big role with that as well. We'll get more into that in another video, but I just wanted to emphasize that very quickly. Next model we're going to go ahead and pull up, if it wants to pull up, is the GFS right here. Here is your GFS run right here. GFS is definitely kind of interesting as well. It's definitely showing some more development as well, just mainly keeping it further to the east. So this is what we got for you guys right here. Dual developments going on in the eastern Pacific. The system to the west makes landfall and dissipates. The system to the east actually strengthens a pretty significant margin right here. Before starting to turn a little bit and make landfall near the Gulf of Tehuantepec, actually, and potentially that carryover effect causes some tropical development over here in the western part of the Gulf, although the GFS does want... It's a bit disorganized, I will say. It's kind of it kind of carries over to over here, and then you have another area of vorticity start flinging up right here. I'm not 100% sure how legitimate, at least the eastern part of it is. I think the western part is a bit more realistic over here, given the trends and given what that this system is moving and making landfall near the Gulf of Tehuantepec right there. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. The GFS does seem a bit unrealistic at this current point, and that's something that I am paying attention to. At least in terms of it developing further to the east, kind of just off its own right here. So that's kind of what I'm watching. I think this is a part of GFS vorticity bias, excuse me, for at least first part of this, although part of this does seem to be legit. That's your GFS. Here is your Canadian run right here. Let's see what the Canadian cooks up right here. The Canadian has that dual system development, and then you have this system kind of hugging the coast of Nicaragua and Costa Rica and El Salvador before making landfall over there. Let's go ahead and continue to see this. Yes, even the Canadian does have the system emerging near the Bay of Campeche over here and moving further to the east, not further to the east, but further to the west. There's a closed low right there, and some tropical development with this is possible right here. We're just going to have to wait and see what that intensity reads up as in the long run, but even the Canadian is kind of leaning in towards this European development situation, although it remains pretty weak and relatively broad. So that's kind of what we're looking at for right there. That's your Canadian run. Let's go ahead and take a quick gander at the icon, because now hopefully we have a situation where it's a bit further, a bit closer to what maybe end up happening. So that's what we have, at least in terms of the time frame. Let's go ahead and start here with 96 hours out. The icon over here is starting to get its act together, slowly organizing and developing and slowly getting its act together. Hold on. Tropical Tidbits has been very slow in terms of getting this the models pulled up right here. But ultimately, the icon does start to have this system emerge off the Gulf region over here, further to the west, similar to what the European kind of is doing and what the Canadian run is doing as well. 1010 millibar system kind of remains a relatively opened-ish low, but you do see that carryover effect starting to pop up over here. So that's your situation that we're paying attention to in the Gulf, and you're going to want to pay attention to this if you're in Texas, maybe if you're in Louisiana, if you're in the eastern coast of Mexico, you're going to want to watch this as well. All these models are definitely starting to pick up on it more and more as we get closer to it, but we still have time to figure out how this system is ultimately going to pan out. For right here, it's still about I'd say about 6 days out, 6 to 7 days out in advance before the system starts to emerge in the Gulf region or in the Caribbean, as well as the European ensembles are forecasting for. But that's kind of what we're paying attention to right here. Looking at the conditions, looking at the models, looking at all that, at least the synoptics and the dynamics of it, definitely looks somewhat legitimate with this, especially with the European Canadian icon somewhat on board with this too. Not necessarily showing strong development, but rather showing at least some sort of development in this. So it's definitely something we're going to want to watch out for, and we'll continue to keep you updated on here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you'd like to help out, hang out, or ask us some questions, feel free to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that is in the end screen. We're hoping to get a tropical team kind of rebuilt, for this season, so I look forward to seeing who might be interested and to see if anyone wants to hang out with us as well. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.